Boy Scout Troop 125. It's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And many of these young men were here last year as Cub Scouts leading the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you could stand as they come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, young men. I appreciate that. We would like to welcome our former city council member, community volunteer, and my friend, Miss Pat Tanner, to deliver our invocation this evening. Welcome, Miss Tanner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the invitation. Let us pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, once again, we come to you with bowed heads and humble hearts, asking that you be one in the midst. Father, we continue to pray and ask that you bless the leaders of this city and all that they are trying to do for the betterment of this community. Father, we understand that we will not always agree, but let us agree to disagree. And if we do disagree, let us do it in a civil manner, Heavenly Father. Not only do we ask that you bless the leaders of this city, but we ask that you bless the leaders of this county, this state, and the United States of America. Bless those who are less fortunate than we are. Continue to guide us, lead us, and order our steps. Bless the sick and the afflicted wherever they may be. Continue to bless and care for those who are in the military, who are making that sacrifice for our safety. Father, once again, we humbly ask these and all blessings in thy name. Amen.
Amen. I'd like to call to order our June 6, 2024 council meeting. Again, I want to thank Scout Troop 125 for joining us tonight and delivering our Pledge of Allegiance. And Ms. Tanner, it's always an honor to have you in our presence. So, we'll begin with the consideration to approve tonight's agenda. Are there any changes, revisions, or motions?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All members voted for the motion. We do have, under guests and visitors, I have a proclamation to deliver this evening. And that City of Canton Proclamation number 202-40606, Municipal Court Clerks Week, June 10th through the 14th, 2024. Whereas municipal court clerks play a significant role in ensuring that municipal courts preserve public safety and promote quality of life in the City of Canton and all local municipalities across the state. And whereas the procedures for the Canton Municipal Court operations are set forth by the Uniform Rules of Municipal Court and other laws of the state of Georgia. And whereas municipal court clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. And whereas Canton Municipal Court handles adjudication of nearly 4,000 citations annually, as well as school safety zone violations and code enforcement concerns. And whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments and significant role municipal court clerks play in preserving the public confidence, integrity, and impartiality of the judiciary. Now, therefore, I, Bill Grant, Mayor of the City of Canton, do recognize the week of June 10th through the 14th, 2024 as Municipal Court Clerks Week, and further extend appreciation to our Municipal Court Clerk, Teresa Fitz, Deputy Court Clerk, Cheryl Dumas, Court Services Representative, Amy Lutz, and all Municipal Court Clerks for the vital services they perform and their exemplary dedication to the communities they represent and serve. And Ms. Fitz and Any of your team that's here, would you join me up front for present this proclamation? We appreciate you. Okay, moving right along. We do have two public hearings this evening before our business meeting begins. The first one is a public hearing for case MPA 2404-001, Master Plan Amendment request to add residential as an allowed use in Riverstone Pod B, and variance request to reduce required buffer. Mr. Green?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As you just stated, this application, MPA 2404-001, is a request to add the uses of residential to Pod B of the Riverstone development. The applicant is also seeking to reduce the required 50-foot buffer when PDMU property abuts property that is zoned RA 8 or 6 in this case. He's looking to reduce that from a 50-foot buffer to a 10-foot buffer and building setback line along the rear and side property lines. His plan is to construct 4 duplex buildings for a total of 8 living units. They have representation here tonight to present their case during the public hearing portion, and of course, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have for myself or staff.
Thank you, Mr. Green. So at this time, we will open the public hearing. And again, is the applicant here to present or speak on behalf of the case?
Good evening. I'm here to speak on behalf of the project. My name is Melissa Castile, and you want my address?
Yes, please.
8020 Main Street, Woodstock, Georgia. As Mr. Green presented, the request before you is for a master plan amendment to Pod B of the Riverstone PUD master plan. The use is currently commercial, and the request is to amend this segment in the application, the 0.89 acres to residential use. This piece is located on Center Street, north of Riverstone Parkway, and it's north of what I believe is the Aldi there. It is, again, 0.89 acres, and the request is for 4 buildings to be a total of 8 duplexes. It leaves approximately 45% open space on the site. As you can see, the green adjacent to and rear of the units there on the rendering. The intent is to provide affordable housing on this location. It's actually a very great location with nearby amenities, including walkable access to jobs. It's approximately 140 feet, the closest to a local CCT bus stop. It's also in walking distance to the Heritage Park Trailhead and the Etowah Greenway Trail System. There's also access to services within blocks and even across the street to affordable grocery stores. So again, the request is to go to this density as an intended reduction in use intensity from commercial to residential. And it also provides a transition between the general commercial or semi-big box commercial that's located just across the street, or across Center Street, actually. It is downhill in elevation. And then the adjacent residential to the rear. And as you flip through the presentation there, again, this is a rendering of the site, potentially what it could look like. There is some buffering already actually existing on the south side of Center Street, at the top of the hill between the Aldi Shopping Center and Center Street. And there is a large grade change there. Do I flip before? Okay, thank you. This is the site plan unrendered, just to show you the layout and the topography. If you're familiar with Center Street, there is an extreme grade change from the access road there up the hill to Cross Street. This is the aerial. Again, but on that south side of Center, you can see there's some existing wooded areas and also an evergreen landscape buffer. It was either cryptomerias or leyland, if you're familiar with those, that create that buffer there already. Those are some pictures of, are these on-site or adjacent sites? Okay, these are on the site now. Of course, what we expect to see is when this is cleaned up, that it's maintained and more than what's happening now with it being unoccupied. This is an example of the potential units that would be located on the property. You can see a mixture of material types on the elevation. And I'm going to go back to this plan. Speaking to the request for the variance on the reduction of the buffer, that 50-foot buffer effectively makes this parcel unusable. And again, looking at use of the site, with the shape of it, the topography, the location, the elevation change from the existing commercial access, and the application of that 50-foot buffer is not usable as commercial use. So again, another reason why to request the change. We're here if you have any other questions for us.
Okay, thank you. We had no one else sign up to speak at the public hearing, so we will close the public hearing at this time and open up to council for discussion or any questions for Mr. Green on this project.
Do you have a question?
Mr. Tolan?
Mr. Green, I'm curious relative to the comment the applicant made about affordability, what that definition is. Is it based on AMI? Is it based on just raw rents? I'd love a little bit more clarity on that.
That I'm not sure about, but I'm certain that Mr. Gunnan, he is here tonight. He could answer that question for you.
Thank you.
Mr. Green, do you know if the plan includes, you see it closely, does it include sidewalks
Yes.
in the area? Okay.
Sidewalks will be a requirement if this gets approved and developed.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I do have one.
Mr. Waterman?
Mr. Green, though no one signed up to discuss here at the public hearing, there was a public input session.
Yes, sir, there was. I forwarded that information to you folks, I think one day this week.
Right.
I believe the applicant told me there was only 4 people that showed up, and none of them spoke in opposition to it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Ms. McGrew?
Mr. Green, will these be rental or fee simple?
Mr. Gunn has said that it's undetermined at this point.
Okay. What I was wondering is if these are rental, that would be considered a commercial property. Would that fall under having to have the exterior, the elevation, 50% brick or stone?
With them being duplexes, it has been the practice of the city in the past to have them come before the design review team. And we will strongly encourage them to be 50.1% brick.
Thank you.
Mrs. Green, in terms of ADA compliance, will there be any of the units that will be ADA compliant?
I don't believe that is a requirement due to the number of the units, but I can certainly check on that for you with Mr. Kula.
Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Young?
Question about the reduced buffer. It would not adversely impact any of the adjacent properties, reducing it that much to that small of a buffer?
In my opinion, no, sir. Most of the houses that are located on the adjacent street, they are closer to the street than the back portion of their lot.
So probably not.
Slim to none. We can also request for an enhanced buffer with additional plantings, a thick row of evergreens, arborvitae, Leland cypress. One of our recommendations, if this does get approved, is the installation of a screening fence.
Okay. Thank you.
Further? Thank you, Mr. Green. Move on to our second public hearing. And it's that time of year to have our first public hearing of the 2024 millage rate. Ms. Forrester?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is our first of 3 public hearings on the 2024 millage rate. And I've designed it to be a brief introductory to the millage rate process. So if there's things that you would like me to address in the next few public hearings, I'm happy to take notes. And we'll proceed through here, and I'll take questions after the presentation. So the importance of property tax. This is not for your scrutiny. This is just a graph from our last audit. And the highlighted area will show you that property taxes make up 18% of the city's total revenues. And it's not as large as the water and sewer charges you see here, but it is significant enough that we have to address because of the size of the revenue and because of state law. There are several rules that regulate addressing this millage rate publicly each year, whereas you can see the rest of the pie pretty much can be set once and forgotten. Some of the rules on state guidelines, this again is not to be scrutinized and reviewed, but it is available if someone wants to pull it up. And these are all documents that the state mandates we fill out to their standards. It tells us how we calculate the rollback rate. It tells us what the advertisements in the newspaper have to say and what they have to look like. So I understand sometimes people are confused in the wording on how the publications appear in the paper. I will let you know I do not draft these statements. That is required by the state. And we'll look at the bottom right-hand presentation a little later in the slideshow. So this is a 20-year history of Canton's millage rate. You'll see that staff is recommending that we continue at the 5.4 rate. This is the lowest possible rate we've identified as able to keep the taxes and still function with all of our current services while generally utilizing some of the reserves. We're still putting together the 2025 fiscal year budget. We'll present that in a few months. So here is an enlargement of that form that I mentioned earlier. This is what is presented in the newspaper. And so you'll see that right-hand column is the current assessments per the tax assessor's office for this present year, which will be the city's fiscal year 2025. These numbers often do change. Appeals are allowed through the end of June. So as those come in, the tax assessor will review. In previous years, that causes the assessments to drop once the assessor goes through appeals. On occasion, it may rise, but that has yet to be determined. If you notice there, kind of in the middle in bold, M&O millage rate, you'll see that our millage rate has stayed the same, but because assessments have creeped up, our net taxes are increasing. This year, based on these assessments, the city is expected to see an increase in tax revenue of $639,000 if we maintain the 5.4 millage rate. Why we have to maintain the 5.4, well, why it's strongly suggested, is because our millage rate is also used to pay for the fire tax at the county. This is the green line is the city's millage rate. The gray is the county's fire tax. We do not know yet what they're going to have for the 2024 calendar year. We're anticipating an increase, but we can't wait to set our millage rate on the county. So the gap between the gray line and the green line, that is what the city has left of the millage rate from property taxes to pay for all city services. Everything below the green line immediately goes back to the county for fire. Here are some calculations. The public would think we're fortunate that the fair market value of real estate has stayed the same this year as compared to last year. So you'll notice these calculations look like last year's presentation. Fair market value of a home in the city of Canton is $450,000 on average. That comes to $180,000 assessed value for which the millage rate is applied. We're suggesting the 5.4, and that will result in a $972 tax bill for a homeowner without any exemptions. And homeowners without any exemptions is a very small percentage. You'll notice, per the tax assessor's office, only 2,500 residential properties in the city are owner-occupied with no other exemptions. This is a calculation for a homeowner that is a senior exemption. This rate also applies to those receiving the disability exemption. Based on the same $450,000 average home price, a senior or disability exemption, they will only pay $367.20 in property tax to the city of Canton at the 5.4 millage rate. Based on current reports from the tax assessor's office, 30% of Canton's residential properties have the senior exemption. Of those with the senior exemption, 93% of the properties with senior exemption receive the full exemption, which amounts to a tax savings of $604.80 for each senior property. While we're talking about residential properties, I just wanted to point out too that 45% of Canton's residential properties are investment properties. This is a schedule of what's coming. Today, the first public hearing, because we're recommending a millage rate of 5.4, which is above the rollback rate, we need to have two other hearings. The second one will be July 11th, and then the third and final hearing where we're asking for an approval of a millage rate will be July 18th. And at the end of July, we'll have to submit whatever your decision is to the county. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Forster. We appreciate that overview. At this point, we will open the public hearing. There are two residents sign up to speak. Call your name, please step forward and state your name and address clearly into the microphone. Chris Everett.
My name's Chris Everett, and I live at 133 Hidden Trail Court. Mr. Mayor and Council, when you look at the tax increase of 5.82%, or the increase in tax revenue, as an aside, mine personally goes up 7.36. I don't know. But anyhow, the Social Security COLA was 2.66 for next year, which means the city is going up more than double what Social Security will increase. So as our income increases, the city takes more and more of it. The original fire tax, when the contract was signed in September of 2016, was 3.436. Last year it was 2.8, which is an 18.5% rollback. So as your millage rate stays the same, the cost, strictly fire, the cost has been going down. So the margin has become larger and larger. As far as what you can expect next year, Harry Johnson, the chairman, sent out an email to the Cherokee County. In it, he states, and I quote, we should have a little more flexibility on the fire tax, which leads me to believe the millage rate is actually going to go down, which is supported by their 10-year history in this graph where it's going like that. So to justify keeping the rate the same solely because of the fire tax unknown is just, I don't agree with that. And I think what we should see, especially when you look at previous years, you know, the 5.82% increase this year, that doesn't sound bad. But when you look at the two previous years, where it's 25.79%, 23.53%, the city's been taking in enough revenue. And I don't see why you should continue to take more. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Everett. Thomas Weaver.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Thomas Weaver. I reside at 131 Old Marietta Road here in Georgia. Thank you for recognizing me to speak. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I don't envy your position. However, I was virtually in attendance to the work session for the Cherokee County Board of Commissioners at their most recent work session this past Tuesday evening, and they proposed through their staff to actually, perhaps to the chagrin of the previous speaker, to raise their fire millage rate. And today, I was fortunate to have an actual telephonic conversation with Chief Eddie Robinson over the phone for half an hour over the matter. He said that the Cherokee County Board of Commissioners' desire is to move forward in their plan to staff a fourth full battalion to put 4 firefighters on every truck and 3 on every ladder and 2 paramedics for every squad, if I understood him correctly. And to do so, they would need to actually raise the fire millage rate. I have it wrote down here, but the proposal is to raise it 246 thousandths of a mil. Well, the trouble with that is based on the presentation that Ms. Forrester just graciously presented to all of us, including yourselves, it's expected, based on the preliminary estimates, that an additional $24 to $25 million worth of property for homestead exemptions will be phased in this year. As you know, and as the city manager has graciously shared from years prior, which is reflected on the minutes, somebody has to subsidize that difference. And it certainly won't be the senior homesteads for the first $280,000 worth of their property valuation. As I've shared before with council, I'll state again for the benefit of all whom are attendants here, and if anybody would like to go back, I'm more than welcome to show them on the video minutes that's reflected on the Legistar website here, where I've shared that the city of Canton as a whole, based on the strong conservative fiduciary principles of this council and Team Canton, having tightened their belt for years, has been better than good with the purse and the wallet. Staff has done more with less for years. I'm just concerned, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but as the exemptions for the homestead properties continue to increase, where's that money going to come from to subsidize the fire millage difference if the Board of Commissioners chooses to move forward with their fire millage rate that's actually going to go up from last year? Where's that difference going to come from? No one here has ever complained about having good firefighting service. We benefit from having a fully funded Cherokee County Fire and Emergency Services Department. The city made the decision to consolidate with the county, and that was a wise decision, I think. But I suppose with the traffic and the water and now the numbers, again, I don't envy your position. There's no easy answers.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. At this point, we will close the public hearing and open up to council for discussion. I didn't want to iterate again, as Ms. Forrester said, this is our first of 3 public hearings, which are mandated to have And really tonight's hearing and presentation discussion is to just get the big picture, get the overview, so that we are fully educated as council as to what the considerations are as we continue to go forward, the staff and preparing the budget that we will be reviewing during this process in tandem. Again, we have a little over 30 days before our next public hearing, so we'll have 2 more public hearings, and we'll get more information, but tonight is being as transparent with information as possible. Mr. Peppers, would you like to add any general observations before we open up the council for discussion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. So several weeks ago, staff started talking about the millage rate as we were preparing for public hearings. And one of the considerations that staff had at the time was this might be a good year to recommend to council to consider some type of rollback in the millage rate. So the calculated rollback our calculated rollback would take us from 5.4 to 5.27 mils. So it's about it's a decrease of 0.13 mils. For the city, again, based upon the information that was presented, that's about a $630,000 elimination of revenues. We would have just recommended that we move forward with utilizing fund balance to make up that particular gap. On Friday of last week, I was in a meeting with county staff talking about a development concern. And in that particular meeting, as it was wrapping up, I asked the question of the county manager. I said, you know, we're working on our millage rate right now, and one of the linchpins in our budgeting process is always, what is the fire tax going to be? And at that time, he said, we're thinking about raising the fire tax. I said, okay, do you know what that number is going to be? And he said, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think it's north of 3 mils. So as you can see, our current rate is 2.764. I sent an email yesterday just to the county manager and the county finance director. And I said, I just want to make sure that the fire tax might go up to 3 mils. And the response from the county's chief financial officer was as follows. The current recommendation is 3.01 mils, which is a 0.246 mil increase, and they will let us know if they receive any changes from the Board of Commissioners. So running some quick calculations, for us, a tenth of a mil is basically about $500,000. So if their goal is to raise the millage rate by 0.246 mils, that's almost $1.5 million that we will have to make up, or I'm sorry, $1.2 million that we will have to make up for additional fire cost. And that basically takes you back to between their rates in 2021 and 2022, if you're looking at that chart. If we do the rollback and we also see an increase, what we're going to see is the city's taxes coming down and the county's taxes going up, so that wedge is closing. And of course, as Ms. Forrester mentioned, that wedge is what we operate the rest of the city on. If council decides to move forward with a rollback and the county sticks with their increase as staff has proposed, that's a little over $2.1 million that the city will have to identify an additional revenue from some other source as part of the budgeting process. I will tell you that if the city rolls back the tax rate on a $400,000 home, that savings would be $20.80. And on a $300,000 home, these were questions I had from the Tribune, that savings would be $15.60. As I mentioned, at this time, we really are not able to give you better figures on the fire tax because that'll ultimately be a decision of the county. The problem that we have is that's going to be a decision of the county in July, and we have to adopt our rates at the same time. So from our end, staff will continue to look at opportunities for us to have conversations about what we can do for homeowners, property owners in the city. We did want to get this public hearing to you as early as we could in the process, and have a gap of time in between it and the next public hearing so that we can have those conversations and maybe receive more information from the county on what their proposals are going to be, because that'll better inform you on what you might want to do with the tax rate. I did not anticipate that any of you would want to see an increase in the tax, which is currently at 5.4 mils. If that was something that the council wanted to do, we would have to re-advertise for 3 public hearings with a change in the millage rate suggested at 5.4. So that's why we wanted to give you some extra time this year. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. We're happy to provide you any information we can gather for you on those factors that are out there.
Thank you, Mr. Pepper. This is great information. Again, it's all everything we should consider going forward as we have these millage rate discussions and also reviewing our budget. A couple other things just quickly. I know that we have a compensation, citywide staff compensation survey or study in process. And do you have any preliminary idea of how that may impact our budget?
So there were 3 different scenarios that were proposed to us by Condrey. One is a 100% scenario, which is basically meeting the threshold, the average pay of the jurisdictions that were surveyed. One is 102.5%, so going a little bit above that, and one's 105% of that. That range is somewhere between $700,000 and $1 million in additional payroll to meet the study. I will tell you that as I'm working through that right now, some of their information is going to be useful and some of it will be changed in our recommendation to you. So, for example, they may have a position and a range based upon the 14 different jurisdictions that they evaluated in the region, but that position in that particular community may not be of the same value as it is with the city of Canton, because it may provide additional services here than it does in that jurisdiction, so to speak. So we're going through that process right now. Comprehensively, there'll be an increase on average for every employee of about 4.8%, 5%, which is matching the employment cost index, which came out in March for local government employees. One other thing that I would mention to you, there's kind of a conversation going on with the other cities at this time, because when we get to millage rate time, everybody's asking, what are you going to do and what are you going to do? And so don't hold me to this, but this is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that several of the other communities are going to hold steady. Woodstock's kind of in a different position because they just had voters approve last year a Parks and Rec bond referendum. So the totality of their millage rate may increase, but it may increase based upon adding that particular bond item. They're still working on what their final numbers are. If Holly Springs or Ball Ground do anything, if they do anything beyond a full rollback, and if that full rollback is not more than 0.26 mils, all of their residents will see a tax bill increase because of what will go on with fire services. If the city of Canton holds our steady at 5.4 mils, even though our fire bill goes up, our residents will not see that same increase in the tax rate that those other communities would see in theirs. So as we're going through the process with you of having public hearings on property taxes, those cities are doing the same thing, and their elected officials will have kind of the same concerns that you do in conversations and formal action.
So in that scenario, if those other cities do hold steady, and we did maintain the current 5.4 mils, we would still have the lowest millage rate in Cherokee County, one of the lowest in the state. Again, the goal is always to have the least tax burden possible for all of our residents. But I think the compensation study and what we may be looking at, just saying approximately $1 million in increases in pay. Something we certainly have to keep in mind as we're having these conversations. And then on the senior tax exemption I believe I saw where we added around 200 more homes, more exempt homes to that this year.
I think the final number on the data that we got from the tax assessors was 165 parcels.
Okay.
So we went from 3,167 to 3,332.
Okay. So again, 30% of our households do enjoy that exemption. And again, if that fire millage rate does increase, we're covering the cost of all those households because the seniors aren't paying that fire exemption, the ones that are exempt on the fire tax. So again, those are all just big picture things to keep in mind as we have these conversations and look for the way to be the most fiscally responsible that we can be kind of going forward as we're looking to adopt a final millage rate and approve our fiscal budget for fiscal year 2025. Is that right? Looks like it's always kind of one ahead. So any other questions or comments at this time? Of course, Ms. Forrester, Mr. Pepper is always available for information as we go through this process. Again, we start this process and we haven't finalized our budget yet, but it's to be as transparent as possible and get as much input as we can from the public as we go through it. Ms. McGrew?
Thank you. Mr. Peppers, please refresh my memory. Approximately, how much do we have in the fund balance now?
14 million.
And how much of that fund balance would we need to use if we were to remain revenue neutral?
As we haven't finalized the budget, I can't really give you an exact number, but based upon what they're considering with fire and based upon what we've seen in the compensation study, it's going to be at least $2 million. It could be more.
And can you refresh my memory on what is the recommended dollar amount for the fund balance for the year?
The auditors generally recommend at least 2 months of fund balance. We're probably around 7 months of fund balance.
We have about 7 months.
I would mention, though, that of that fund balance, that also includes the $2.8 million loan to the Canton Housing for Tanner Place. It also includes some ARPA money that's left to be spent in the ARPA fund.
I didn't hear that part.
It also includes some ARPA money that has to be spent in the ARPA fund.
So that actually wouldn't count towards our fund balance then?
It does because it was receipted into the general fund. But we do have some expenditures that will have to come out of that for ARPA.
Right, and that has specific uses. We can't just use it willy-nilly, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Are there questions, comments? Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Peppers, I did read the letter from Mr. Harry Johnson last week, and I just want to make sure I got the numbers right. 30% of residents are currently receiving the senior exemptions.
That's correct.
Of that 30%, 90% of them are getting the full exemption.
93%. Yes.
93%? Okay. And 45% of Canton's properties are rental properties.
Correct. And that is single-family residential properties. That is not apartment complexes, which are considered to be commercial properties.
All right. So here's my question. I met with a resident who's obviously under the age of the exemption age, and obviously taking care of our seniors is a priority. But the question I got posed and I didn't really have a good answer for was, what about us? And basically what they said was their tax bill was $3,118 6 years ago, and when they got that statement last week, $7,302.62. And what that resident was concerned about was, now I'm paying more in taxes than I am for the mortgage. And I don't have a good answer for that. So do you have any recommendations on how we can help the non-seniors?
Sure. So of that $7,000 tax bill, probably about $1,200 of that's going to be their city taxes. probably another $1,200 or so is going to be their county taxes, and the remainder would be their if that same property owner lived outside of the city limits, their tax bill would come down a little bit because they would not be paying city taxes, but they would be paying fire taxes. So on a $7,200 tax bill, it's probably a savings of about $400 not living in the city. So it's not necessarily just an issue in the city, it's an issue countywide. As you know, the voters had an opportunity to, in the last election for a referendum that puts a cap on and increases, it actually increases the senior tax exemption on school districts. There's some other measures that are coming out in the November election that are statewide constitutional amendments as it relates to taxes. It's a big issue at the legislature. You know, lots of people are seeing their mortgage payments go up because their escrow costs are going up based upon changes in taxes. Insurance premiums are another big part of that because replacement costs are already going up as well. It's an issue. I mean, it's a major issue. You know, the question that I try to have with our staff is, okay, what do we do to stay competitive as a city, and what do we do to stay financially frugal with the funds that we receive? We try to put as many of the capital projects as we can into our utility fund, which is water and sewer, or into our SPLOST projects or impact projects, the remainder of which is pretty much operations. And if you can imagine in a city our size, for example, the city controls the cost of streetlights in neighborhoods. So those structures are put in by Georgia Power, but the city pays the bill. If you can imagine your power bill at your house, then multiply that by 1,000 or so streetlights across the city, plus traffic signals and what have you. If you've seen your power bill at home increase, the same thing happens with the city's power bills on those things plus our facilities. The cost of vehicles have gone up. If you've tried to purchase a new vehicle on the market, you've seen that. Imagine trying to lease police cars. We're in a competitive war in many cases with others to lease equipment or buy equipment. Cost of construction goes up. Just as your insurance costs have gone up, the city's insurance costs are going up. So, I mean, every year, every day, every month, we get invoices, we see those increases. We do the best we can to eat as much as we can. And like I said, you know, our recommendation coming into the fiscal year was going to be maybe this is the year we can roll it back a little bit. Last week's news from the county was quite a curveball to staff, you know, as other communities are talking about holding their rates steady, to hear the fire department and fire tax is going to increase theirs, you know. But at the same time, I have to remember, like all other jurisdictions, they're trying to pay to keep a professional staff. And labor rates are probably their number one expense in the fire department, and it's not getting cheaper to hire firefighters, especially firefighters who try to live in your community, and housing costs are going up. So it's a vicious cycle. You know, I'm always open for conversations with residents. I'm happy to talk to them about their specifics. We can pull out their individual tax bills and look at percentages that are going to the city and what those would break down to over our cost of the budget. You know, for not every senior, of course, is going to have that $450,000 home that we show as the average. We have a lot of seniors who have more expensive homes, and so their tax bills are going to be more than that $347. But I would dare say that $347 on the average house for a senior, $1 a day to have police, fire, streets, public works, parks and recreation, that's not necessarily an unreasonable expense. So.
And one final question, because it's come up a few times. Are the residents not receiving the senior tax exemption subsidizing for the revenue we're not collecting for the seniors?
Yes, sir. So we pay 100% of the fair market value tax towards the fire district. So we have to take our full digest, apply the tax value to it, apply the millage rate for the fire district, and submit a check back to the county. Then after that's done, we can remove the piece for seniors. So, for example, if a senior is in one of those $450,000 homes that Ms. Forrester showed, give me 1 second. So in this case, on a $450,000 home, that senior's paying $367.20 in taxes. That same home is paying $972 in taxes if you figure that about 60% of the taxes that we collect are going towards fire service. 60% of 972 is what we're paying for every one of those average homes in the city, even though a portion of which are only paying $367. So we either have to pull that money from other portions of the budget, or we have to keep our millage rate steady so that all other non-senior properties are helping to offset the gap that's created from the senior tax. Bottom line is, the residents in the city of Canton approved a senior tax exemption many years ago. That's our promise to those citizens, and that's what we abide by every year in the calculation of our millage rate and budgets. But as the fire tax goes up, as assessments go up, and as we try to hold the millage rate steady, at some point those two lines are going to intersect, and fire taxes will outpace the millage rate. And as we increase senior properties every year, that means that, I don't want to use the term double whammy, but it basically is a double whammy for every other parcel. I have a lot of citizens that say to me, well, why don't you just cut the tax rate for everybody? That's what a revenue neutral rollback rate would do. Well, when you cut that, it's not just for residential properties. It hits every single property. So your biggest property owners, which include things like your major retailers, your major industry, your apartment complexes, when you cut the property tax rate to help a homeowner, you're helping those property owners even more because they tend to pay more in taxes. So that means we have to make up that gap that might be coming in from commercial taxes somewhere else. Could be fees, could be permit fees, and things like that.
Mr. Waterman?
Mr. Peppers, I think the stat was 45% of the properties in the city are rentals. Homes, does that apply to primary residents only for those with exemptions? Or let's say a senior has 2 houses in the city. Does the exemptions apply to the second residents as well?
The exemption only applies to the home where someone has their homestead exemption. So you could not be a senior and accept that exemption on multiple parcels.
So no double.
Now, having said that, I guess you could have a situation where you had a couple and they own 2 homes and each one of them is over 62 and each one of them is claiming a property as their homestead. You know, there's always ways, I guess, people can game the system, but technically it's supposed to fly with a homestead. So.
Okay.
And I will say, of the 45% of those that are rental properties, a lot of them are in our neighborhoods. A lot of them are investment properties that have been bought by out-of-state companies. There's lots of information that's been flowing around in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and other papers about how hot that investment market is in residential in the state of Georgia. There's not a lot in state laws that allow local governments to prohibit some of that. And so that, you know, we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because we got those investment companies that they're coming in and buying properties in neighborhoods, and we don't have a lot of regulations that we can put on those as it relates to rental properties. I will say one option that the city does have, it would require legislative approval, would be increasing the homestead exemption. So what would happen in that particular instance is every homeowner, not just seniors, but every homeowner who lives in the structure that they're paying taxes on as their primary residence would receive a greater exemption on their taxes. On non-homesteaded properties, including those rental properties and commercial properties, would likely see an increase in the tax rate to offset that loss of revenue on homestead exemptions. That's what a lot of cities around us are doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's something, you know, we certainly should consider as we want to encourage single-family ownership. I also want to mention, just for the record, the 45% being rental properties. That is a reduction from what it has been in the past, so that number is actually coming down, correct?
Yes, I believe it was closer to 50% a couple
I think
years
it's
ago.
50% just a couple years ago, so we've actually decreased that by 5% or more just in the past couple years. So I think that is a positive sign.
And Mr. Peppers, not to beat a dead horse here, one more thing I wanted to share from that resident that I met with. Again, their tax bill, $7,302.62, and they are not receiving the exemption. They pointed out a house three houses down for them on the other side of the street, identical house, identical floor plan. Their tax bill was $1,118.21. And again, it sounds like this is more of a school tax issue problem than it is a city. But I think we're hearing the cries because people are starting to say, well, what about us? Because at some point, from what they've said, what I've gathered, they're worried that they're going to be taxed out of their homes. So, with an increase in the homestead exemption, is there a buffer for that? Or is there a cap for that? How much could we do?
I think we just have to look at the numbers. I don't really have an answer for that. Every year we're looking at assessments. Assessment data changes. Number of owner-occupied units changes. So if that's the route that the council would like to go, that's something we'll really have to dive into. Again, as I mentioned, it'll take legislative approval. So that means getting with our legislature in the fall of this year, our legislative delegation in the fall of this year, having those conversations. They, of course, would have to get with legal counsel at the legislature on drafting whatever language goes into a bill. Then, of course, you got to get it on a ballot. You got to get it approved. In most cases, when you do something like that, it's about a 2-year cycle before you can actually implement.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Peppers.
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
Real quick.
Yes.
So, I mean, moving forward, if we want to roll back the millage rate, we're going to have to look at our chart here, our pie chart with what the percentages, and we're going to have to cut something out in order to, is that basically what we're going to have to reduce? And a lot of these things, you can't charge more for, sanitation. That's just raising where would you go? Obviously water and sewer, we can't, that's just raising the bill more than we would be able to benefit from rolling back and getting the $20 like you said. So I guess you have to find somewhere, in this chart that we can cut out.
So some of our franchise taxes are already capped at the state level. Those wouldn't be able to be changed. It's easy sometimes for people to say, well, just increase the building permits. Well, state law says if whatever funds we bring in from building permits, we're supposed to put back into the Building and Safety Services Department for the work that's done to get the building permits. So if you increase one category of revenue, you might also have to increase that same category in expenditure to meet the state law. We'd probably be looking at fees, anything that we could do with fees. Of course, you have fund balance. You could eat up some of your fund balance with expenditures. That's something that you could probably get away with for a year or two. But if you start relying too heavy on your fund balance and you get into a situation where revenues are off a particular year, then that starts eating that fund balance faster. I believe when Mr. Ingram started here in 2009, our fund balance was maybe a week. It was very low. In fact, our community was like a lot of communities around us where we would do tax anticipation notes. We would ultimately borrow money from a bank on the reliance that we would have taxes coming in that we could repay that note. And you're paying a 3, 4, whatever the percent interest is on that particular note just to get by. I will say as a city, we're in a good spot with the way our fiscal year is starting in October. Traditionally speaking, with our fiscal year in October, we collect a large amount of our revenues at the first part of the year with property taxes. Cities that start their fiscal year in January may have to wait 3/4 of the year, almost a full year, to get their property tax revenue. Cities that start their budget in July have to wait a period of time and get in those funds, and so they end up delaying operations or delaying projects until those funds are in. our system of having October 1 is really helpful to the city in keeping us from having to do that. But as you start eating into your fund balance, then you get rid of the situation where a citizen or a group comes to you with a great idea and it wasn't originally in the budget, so now we need to pay for it where we're going to pull it for. In the past, we've done it with fund balance and done a budget amendment at the end of the year to cover that. You start eating your fund balance, you don't have that same opportunity.
What does the stormwater charges, and I apologize, I don't know that. What are those charges? Where does that go towards?
So we have a stormwater utility. It is calculated based upon an impervious unit, an EU. Most single-family residential are considered to be 2 impervious units. Those are currently collected as part of our water and sewer bills. So if you get your utility bill from the city, you'll see that on there. There are some customers in the south side of the city or property owners in the south side of the city, like Prominence Point. All of that neighborhood's on Cherokee County water and sewer. So we made the decision earlier this year not to send bills for $1.25, but to wait and hold and do one bill at a time for those particular residential units. One of the conversations we had was the possibility of eliminating the stormwater utility and not rolling back the property tax this year, but eating it out of that change in revenues that you see at that 5.82%. That's just not something we can do if they're going to be raising the fire taxes. So, but it does go for stormwater improvements throughout the city.
One last question. Mr. Peppers, not to put you on the spot here. It's certainly our job to listen to the community and hear the community, and it sounds like the community wants relief. And my question is, although rolling the millage rate back is a good gesture and a good idea in theory, on a $450,000 house with a savings of just over $20, is it worth it?
That's a decision for you to make. I mean, as I always tell council, we're going to make a recommendation to you on a budget. We're going to make a recommendation to you on a millage rate. Whatever it is you as an elected body decide, we hope you'll value our opinion in making that decision. But whatever you decide as an elected body is what we'll go back on the staff end and we'll make work. That's our job. So I can't give you a great answer on that. Would a resident want to know that for $20 they lost a police officer? Probably not. I'm not saying that they would, but that's where we get to when you make a decision on the taxes. We have to make a decision on the spending side to offset that.
Thank you, Ms. Peppers.
Yes, sir.
One more thing.
Yes.
From the fire tax standpoint and on the county side, do they provide us a breakdown of on a month? And if they do, I apologize again. Of what they do, like how many calls were this level, fires, traffic incidences, home, is there something that we can look at from just the totality of what they do? Just so we can kind of see, where, obviously a house burning down is probably the word, but you don't see a lot. And I just like to see that from home, where do they spend most of their time? What, just having it broken down.
Sure. So Cherokee County Fire generally provides us with a quarterly report and then an annual report. And within each of those reports, they give us a breakdown of the calls that they've responded to countywide. And then they give us a breakdown of calls they've responded to in the city. In most cases, the calls are similar. Where we get into a little bit of an issue with Cherokee County Fire is they also operate the ambulance service, emergency medical services. Emergency medical services are provided as a countywide service. So when you write your check for your taxes and that portion goes to the county, that's supposed to include EMS services. But as you know, when you call 911 for an EMS-related incident, you may not get an ambulance, you may get a fire truck. It really just depends on what they can dispatch at that time. And so a lot of what they see in calls are medical-related calls. That's more of a discussion that the elected officials on this body should have with the elected officials on the county body as to or are you fully funding EMS through the county tax? Is it supposed to be under service delivery? But I will get a copy of the most recent report and be happy to.
Thank you.
You know, we're always happy to have Chief Robinson here giving a report and update. And as you said, he's usually recorded, but always an annual report. I'm not sure when that typically occurs, but if we could just find out what their schedule is and when we may have them here, maybe good to ask them to come in and give us a report as we're, you know, considering these options and these decisions before us. So, I mean, again, tonight's the beginning of the discussion, and the goal is always, as I always say, to deliver the highest quality possible services at the lowest possible cost to the citizens. I think we are great stewards of our taxpayers' money. I think most citizens don't actually realize that our total revenues, only 18% of those come from property taxes. But again, it is the citizens' money, and how we spend that is very, very crucial. Every dollar. And even though, like, we go through this as it's an annual planning cycle on millage rate and budgets, I think it's always, wise to keep in mind that what may happen in the future. We don't know what may happen with revenue sources, depending on economy, economic conditions, and also if we did go to revenue position or do a rollback this year, and fire tax continues to increase, are we putting ourselves in a position of having to go back next year or the year before and actually, consider raising taxes in addition to just holding steady. So again, I think Mr. Weaver put it wisely. He doesn't envy our positions, but I think for the most part, we work with the information we have, certainly not knowing the final fire tax or what may happen at the county level is always puts us at a disadvantage. But we act on the information that we have. And again, we always appreciate the input from our citizens as we make these decisions. So.
He asked the question I was going to ask.
Oh,
okay.
Right.
Anything else? Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks everyone, and thanks for the public input on this matter.
And if you think of anything, any other questions or have any comments, please feel free to send them our way, and we'll try to give you as much information as we can.
Okay, thank you. So we will now move into our business meeting, and you have in your packet the draft minutes from our council meeting on May 16th. Are there any changes, revisions, or motions?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All members voted for the motion. We have a couple of informational items this evening, beginning with item A, review of the April financials. Ms. Forrester, you're up again. Don't want you to get too comfortable sitting there. So.
This presentation will probably be much briefer. And I just wanted to touch on a few noteworthy activities. First of all, we paid our semi-annual debt service on the 2021 water and sewer bond. That's the payment on the water pollution control plant. I wanted to highlight that utility billing waived late fees in the month of April because of lost and or delinquent mail. So that is pretty much an exemption of about $13,000 a month because mail was undeliverable. Regarding the undeliverable mail, not only is our mail not getting out to the customers, their payments were not getting back to us, and our vendor payments were not getting out. So some of our vendors were waiting 2.5 months to receive payments. It appears that is stabilizing now. We're getting back on schedule, so hopefully that won't be a problem going forward. But we did feel an impact here at the city with the delay in the mail service. And the fiscal year 2025 budget planning is underway. We'll be bringing items to you next month for suggestions. And I wanted to bring it to your attention that we may be proposing a water and sewer rate increase effective October 1. And we're going to suggest a 2.5% increase. That is what we have held steady since the water rate study was performed in 2019, and that rate has been far below inflation. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Forster, any questions for Ms. Forster at this time? As always, we know where to find you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our next informational item, the Explore Canton updates. Mr. Jackie Ching, thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to speak on the brand growth analytics. Oh, yes. Behind Explore Canton, the city's tourism initiative. Before I start, I would like to quickly shout out my colleagues Mike Loizu, Lauren Johnson, and Kristen Norton Green for playing such a large part in this growth of Explore Canton. So here is just a super quick image. On the laptop is a brief screenshot of what our website looks like, explorecantonga.com. On the tablet in the middle is a brief glimpse at what our newsletter looks like, and on the right, on the phone graphic, is what our Instagram page currently looks like, just to give you guys an idea of the design. So I'll start with our website overview. We have started our soft launch of the website last year in August of 2023, and so far, up to date, we have accumulated 25,000 unique users. That's just basically how many different users have visited our site. Since 2024 has started, we've averaged about 3,200 users a month. The average engagement time per page is sitting around 1 minute and 26 seconds. And to put that in comparison, the average in the travel industry is about 60 seconds. The reason why ours is a little higher than that, we believe, is because the way that we've structured a lot of our pages, we have really engaging videos on almost all of our pages. So with that, it helps a lot for the user to actually understand what they're looking at instead of just looking at photos. They're seeing videos, they're seeing a whole bunch of different angles, anywhere from our events, some of our businesses that we have in Canton, our parks, anything that would draw people to Canton, basically, we have a video for. The average pages viewed by the users for, to also put into comparison, the top 20% of websites usually get about 4. Our goal is to hit the top 10%, which is about 5.2 average pages per experience. And this number will obviously go up the more we expand our pages across the website. Total impressions, we're at 700,000 impressions, and impressions are basically when any of our Explore Canton links pop up when there's a Google search. So anytime somebody searches up, say, Canton, Georgia, or events in Canton, or things to do in Canton, an Explore Canton, Georgia link to one of our pages will pop up. And it's popped up about 700,000 times since last August. And since, in comparison of 2023 and 2024, we've experienced 142% growth. And a lot of that has to do with Google kind of fully recognizing our website as a legitimate attraction around September, October time of 2023. When we soft launched, our website was still about 75% developed. So a lot of our links weren't being pushed out. But closer to September, October, we finally really hit our stride with a full launch. A lot of our traffic sources come from Google searches. As you can see, about 57% of our traffic comes from Google searches. 23% comes directly from when people are typing in explorecantonga.com. Our social media contributes about 6%. Referrals contribute to about 14%. And referrals are basically when our page is backlinked. So, for example, Explore Canton sponsors a lot of events in Canton, and I'll use Wing and Rock Fest as an example. On their website, they have a section that says Explore Canton GA, and it'll link them to our website. So that's basically kind of how we get referrals and how we get people from other websites. I think this number is going to go up in the next couple of months because Explore Canton has a partnership with MurphSurf where they're going to have a QR code to our website on their tubes. And so obviously tubing season for the summer, so we do foresee that number going up as well. And our newsletter, it is only 1%. We just started rolling out our newsletter starting in the month of April, so we also foresee that going up as well. Our top 5 page categories that people are looking up on our website. About 38% of the traffic comes from our events page. So, you know, a lot of events that are going on in Canton, whether it's business held, city held, we all put it onto our event calendar. And obviously a lot of people are looking for things to do here. So events is a very hot page for us. Our homepage, naturally, people are going to, when they type in Explore Canton GA, that'll pop up. Our blog does very well. We have a partnership with Enjoy Cherokee where they share a lot of blog stories for us to post on there. And it just gives a better insight on more detailed stories of businesses, things to do and whatnot than our current general pages that we have. So people are very interested in looking at that more in detail content. Things to do, that honestly is a very broad category that comes to, you know, live music, places to eat, all of that stuff. Food and drink is a little lower. We're currently working with a lot of the local businesses here in the restaurants to get more content of them to kind of push that number up again. As far as device demographics go, we have 64% mobile users, 36% desktop users. I didn't include tablet users, but that's around 2%. And geographical demographics are top cities of users. A lot of people come from Atlanta, 38%. And one of the tourism board's goals was to bring a lot of people from outside of Canton into Canton. So it's nice to see that Atlanta makes up over a third of our traffic. And then obviously Canton, 18%, Woodstock, about 6%, Holly Springs, 3.6%, Milton, 2.2%, Marietta, 1.9%. And these are just the cities in Georgia. I did not include the cities that have come from outside of Georgia, but for your reference, Florida, we've had 2,200 users use our site. Ohio's next with 1,000 users. Virginia's next with 917 users. New York with 714 users. And North Carolina with roughly about 700 users as well. So I just wanted to include this graphic just to kind of show how much of a reach we have across Georgia. I've only labeled basically the top 6 that I just went over, but you can see a lot of the cities around South Georgia kind of falls in between the 11 to 100 users. But obviously the larger cities in Georgia make up a lot of our web traffic. So now I'm going to touch on our social media strategies that we've been having. A lot of it differs from what platform we use, but I'll start with Facebook. So our Facebook currently has 1,600 followers. We started this Facebook in September of 2023, so just a month after our website launched. But the impressions are 74,000 impressions. We've reached about 28,000 people with Facebook, and we've had about 6,000 profile visits. Our strategy for Facebook, in comparison to Instagram, we like to post longer form videos in the landscape format versus a vertical format. We co-host Facebook events that Explore Canton sponsors, basically just getting our image out there, our brand out there. We showcase a lot of blogs with easily accessible links. Facebook is a lot better and link-friendly for users because a lot of Facebook users usually tend to use desktop a little more than mobile. And Instagram isn't too friendly with adding links. So Facebook is really our go-to spot on adding links directly for people to view those stories. And Facebook, we enjoy engaging with the community with more organic replies. We feel like we get a little more engagement on Facebook in terms of people speaking and talking and commenting than Instagram. And I added a little bit more demographic data. So women make up about 79% of our users on Facebook. There's men, it's 21%. Our largest age demographic is from 45 to 54. Second is 35 to 44, then 55 to 64, then 65 plus, and our lowest one is 25 to 34. As far as Instagram goes, we have 1,100 followers, 1,100 followers, sorry. We've reached about 10,000 people. We've had 2.3 thousand profile visits and around 2,600 media likes. That's just total likes for all forms of content, whether it's stories, posts, etc. Yes, so as I spoke earlier about how we do longer content on Facebook, Instagram is obviously better for short form content in the form of Instagram Reels. So we like to format a lot of our videos vertically on there because a lot more Instagram users use their phone. We share a lot more content in the form of Instagram stories. We use hashtags to reach more non-followers. Hashtags work a lot better on Instagram than they do Facebook. And we often invite other pages as collaborators when we post content of them, because when we do that, a lot of our content actually pops up on their followers' feeds without them having to actually share it. So that's really good for brand exposure, and we do a lot with a lot of other, whether it's event coordinators or businesses, they do collaborate with us a lot. The demographics for Instagram are a little different than Facebook. We do have a younger audience on Instagram. Our leading demographic age-wise is 35 to 44, and then second, close tie between 25 to 34 and 45 to 54. So we do have a younger audience for Instagram. And then finally, I'll touch on our newsletter. We just recently rolled out our newsletter starting in April of this year. And we kind of went with the goal of compiling everything that is really hot with our website into a newsletter, just so it's a shorter form for everybody to kind of digest what we think people are wanting to look for. So we just post that once a month right now at the right before the new month. We highlight any event that we think is really engaging from the past month with a short video clip right at the head. So if you remember from the graphic that I showed on the first slide on the newsletter, the image there is usually about an event highlight that caught a lot of traction. We're kind of just putting it into review for people. But we showcase 3 upcoming events, 3 of our latest blogs, and 5 featured photos of obviously our more engaging events. We provide clickable links to our full event calendar as well. That's really popular. We have a section that says things to do, arts and culture, and more events. And everyone just clicks those because those are really the things that people are trying to look for when they're using Explore Canton. So our average open rate right now is 67%, and that's quite literally just when somebody opens our email. Compared to the travel industry average, right now it's 40%. So we're doing well right now, being a little bit above that. The average click rate is 21%. So that's basically when somebody clicks any clickable photo, link that's in our newsletter. The current travel industry average is 1.35%. And the reason why ours is so much higher is because we've decided to go with the approach of having a more visually appealing newsletter with a lot of clickable photos that are kind of sized a lot bigger than the text. And we didn't really want people to read so much. So a lot of what we do is we just add links to back to our website where they can learn more if they're really that interested. So that's why our click rate is very high. We have 455 subscribers right now, and our subscriber growth month over month for the past 3 months has been 52% over each month. That's it. If you guys have any questions, sorry if that was a lot, but if you guys have any questions, I am here to answer.
Thank you, Jackie. It's an excellent presentation and impressive data. Thanks to you and Mike and Lauren and the entire team who's doing a great job on all this, and just keeps getting better. I want to thank Canton Tourism for their hard work and investment on the site and on the program and all that we're doing. Following up on our previous conversations about taxes and millage rate, I mean, we love our daytime visitors and increasing tourism because those are all people coming to the city, spending their money here, and we don't have to spend 1 cent on them in services. So we love it and want to keep the great work going and these great numbers just moving northward. So thank you for your hard work for all the entire team. Any questions for Mr. Chang on this? Thank you so much. We know where to
Good
find
time.
you. Okay, do we have any announcements this evening? We had no one sign up for public input, so we'll move into old business. We have two items. Item A, discussion and possible action on Canton Housing Team recommendation that the city create a Canton Community Land Trust. Mr. Patton.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. If you recall, the initial presentation in regards to this was at the first meeting in May. Staff, city attorney has presented information in an educational manner, if you will, to the Canton Housing Team, part of our GIC project. The housing team fully supports the concept of creating a community land trust. Community land trust basically would be the holder of properties. They can go out and raise monies. They can talk to property owners that might want to donate land, things of that nature. They have the ability to establish long-term leases for residential projects, if you will, as a part of the land trust. Doing long-term leases for the land and removing the land out of the construction cost reduces construction cost about 20 to 25%. This is an avenue that the housing team thinks will help the city of Canton with its efforts to provide affordable housing. I've done a little bit of additional research, had conversations with the city manager. When the city attorney returns, I will be following up with him. But one of the things, possibilities that I have looked at is some established boards that are already in place that were established by City Council could also serve as the board of directors for a community land trust. The Canton Building Authority, their legislation allows them to enter into long-term leases, set fees, things of that nature. That is would be a possibility for consideration. If you recall, I gave an example of a couple of pieces of property that the city currently owns that could possibly be moved over to a community land trust, that they could do something of a residential nature. I provided information about what successes the Athens Land Trust, the Atlanta Land Trust have done here in the state of Georgia in regards to provisions of affordable housing. I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. We appreciate that. And I think the conversation has been great, and I think exploring these tools are sort of vital to our success in the housing sector, and especially increasing the inventory of attainable housing. I know you mentioned, again, you've done a great job, and then the Housing Committee, I want to thank them for their work and efforts. And you mentioned again tonight you had more information that you're uncovering. I think it's a big topic. I think there are a lot of nuances to it. As you mentioned, the council just heard the first presentation or last month. It's my thoughts or approach that this is a big topic, and I think speaking to a couple of council members that there's a lot of questions about it, certainly a lot of interest and a lot of support, but there's questions, and I think citizens have some questions, and I don't want to certainly stop consideration or our work moving forward or gathering information, but I would like to suggest that we actually put this topic on an item for our fall retreat so we can really spend time just rolling up our sleeves, getting into it, getting more information from you, and really considering all the kind of nuances that may be involved in the land trust. Again, I think it sounds like a wonderful tool, but I don't again, we want to do anything we can to solve these issues going forward, but I don't think we have, it's not a, it's only a self-imposed timeline. But we appreciate the hard work, but that's what I wanted to suggest this evening, is that we spend this time at our retreat and put this as a major item on that, and really dig into it really deeply so we can all fully understand it and understand what the contributions it can make to our housing issues. That's all I wanted to say. Comments? Any questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Dolan.
So I totally support, further analyzing it. There's still evolving data coming out. Mr. Patton's done a marvelous job to date with all of his research and recommendations. And, this is yet another tool in the toolbox for the city of Canton. And I would just as soon get it right. I don't think we lose a whole lot by delaying it just a little bit. I'd hate to see us delay it beyond very much beyond the retreat. But, Canton is kind of becoming the envy of the county as it relates to some of the things we're doing with housing. So again, Mr. Patton, great work on this, on the land bank. And I really am excited about some of the things that we can do going forward. If you wouldn't mind, don't want to put you too much on the spot, Mr. Patton, but could you give us a real quick update on where the land bank is relative to the county and the cities that are participating?
I'm waiting a draft resolution to be submitted. Brantley Day with the county volunteered to take the lead on behalf of the housing team in putting documentation together for the creation of a Cherokee Regional Land Bank. The draft documents have been established. Those have been supplied to the local attorneys. The city attorney has been provided copies of the draft documents to create the land bank. I've not received any suggested amendments from the city attorney's office. There have been some discussions with the city manager of the possibility of appointments for that Land Bank Authority Board. There are several things that are being discussed relative to that, and waiting a resolution so that we could bring that to City Council for consideration to move forward with the creation of that regional land bank.
Well, thanks for your continued work on both initiatives.
Mr. Patton, if I'm not mistaken, don't we have, isn't there an example of a trust downtown Canton somewhere?
The city of Atlanta has a...
well, I mean in Canton. Isn't there a conservation trust?
Well, the Corps of Engineers operates something that's similar on some of their property around the lake, in which they do a long-term lease, that sort of thing. But as far as a community land trust for affordable or attainable housing, I'm not aware of one. There could be, and I'm not aware of a land trust that has been established for conservation purposes, if you will. There are some other groups around the Etowah River. Keeper is one that is involved with some conservation matters and utilizing conservation easements with some of the property owners as it relates to protection of the Etowah River. But, a community land trust that would be established for housing as primary purpose, I'm not aware of one with the city.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Follow up. Mr. Patton, didn't you say that Athens-Clarke County utilizes land trusts for conservation? Or am I imagining that?
Well, they do both. The Athens Land Trust, they've been extremely successful in northeast Georgia with use through the land trust for conservation easements associated with properties. They've worked with property owners in the Athens area, and they have conservation easements that they sort of hold, they're the title holder, if you will, of those easements to about 16,000 acres. But for a housing standpoint, Athens Land Trust has worked, and they've got 64 families that they've worked with for first-time homeowners. They've provided assistance for 10 families in affordable apartments that are operated by the City of Athens and the Land Trust. They've got 370 low-income individuals that are residents in another village apartment complex. The Atlanta Land Trust has 42 units that are built with residents living in those units. They've got 181 units under development. They've got an additional 100 future units on the books, and they've got 3 townhome projects for a total of additional 118 units.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Anything else? Okay, well, again, we look forward to the continuing the dialogue on this and more information. And we'll start looking at some dates for our fall retreat. It's not that far away, believe it or not, but we'll get that on the books and look forward to some real in-depth discussions on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. If any of the council members have questions or want additional information, I've got additional information that I can email to you that I did not include in the attachments last month.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Item B, discussion and possible action on an amendment to the resurfacing intergovernmental agreement with Cherokee County. Mr. Peppers.
Back in March, the city entered into an intergovernmental agreement with Cherokee County, as did the cities of Holly Springs and Woodstock, to do joint paving projects together. As you recall, we receive a grant every year from the state of Georgia to help offset some of our paving expenses. And in March of this year, the state issued a second payment to local governments to do additional paving. So the city of Canton is receiving an additional $429,000 or so in what's called a local road assistance grant. What we are asking council to do is to amend our current agreement with Cherokee County so that we can have them do our additional paving for us under that joint contract. We had estimated the work that will be done. It included a base bid and an alternate bid, and then we looked at some of our SPLOST funding to see what else we might have available for paving at the same time. Our base bid was estimated at right around 7. Hold on, I got 2 charts here. The base bid that's in your agenda packet was estimated at $796,783.64. That would be to pave Reservoir Drive from the roundabout in Great Sky all the way back to Reinhardt College Parkway. And then the second portion of that is to do Marietta Highway from Goodwin Road to Ridge Road. That's approximately 1.48 miles. Recall that a good portion of that Reservoir Drive is actually divided parkway, so it's actually more linear lane miles than it is in actual length. And then we had a proposal for 4 additional roadways as alternates, and those include Wanawalk Drive, Wanuki Drive, Magnolia Drive, and Rockcliffe Place. That's an additional 1.128 miles. The county received bids back on Tuesday. Of the bids that were received, the total cost for both of those projects is $1,846,000 and a penny. That bid is going to Baldwin Paving. One of the reasons why we wanted to do a joint bid is because if we only used our portion of local road assistance funds, or that $429,000, Canton, along with the other cities, was afraid that that's such a small paving project, we wouldn't have received good bid responses. So doing jointly, it helps us get the value of those responses. Our estimate on the paving was $997,191.79. So the difference, the bid came in about $3,000 higher, which is what we would consider to be materially insignificant in the total value of that $1 million paving project. So our recommendation to council would be that you authorize the mayor to sign the amended agreement so that we can move forward on these projects. We would normally bring this to you as a discussion item and have it acted on at the next meeting. But as there's not a second meeting in June, we're asking council to take action on that tonight. That will allow this paving contractor to start work hopefully this summer on those particular areas. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
So again, Mr. Peppers, that the new total includes the additional $429,000 we received from the local road assistance grant?
That is correct.
So it basically kind of covers that additional paving.
So the new total, the total for all of these roadways is $1 million in addition to what we have already contracted for paving with the county.
Okay.
Of that, $429,000 is coming from those state grants.
Okay.
So looking back at budget and looking at what we have in SPLOST, we decided to issue a second round of paving, and those are the roads that are included.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from Mr. Peppers on this?
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, Mr. Waterman?
I'd like to make a motion to approve and authorize or allow the mayor to sign the resurfacing intergovernmental agreement with Cherokee County.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All members voted for the motion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Peppers. We'll move into new business and item A, discussion and possible action on the award of task order 6 for the Transportation Improvement Project Reinhardt College Parkway at Highway 140 intersection. Improvement project design services to Michael Baker International in the amount of $78,391.47. Ms. Watson.
Thank you. So this is a continuation of the project we have ongoing there at Reinhardt College Parkway, Michael Baker. This is task order 6, and it is for an environmental site assessment phase 2, which is basically they will go in and look at the sites that may have environmental significance. There are 5 parcels that were identified. As a reminder, this project is funded 80% by the federal government and 20% by the city. Of the city portion, 34.2% is impact fees, and the rest is paid for with SPLOST. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So again, just 20% of the $78,000 would be our commitment, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Watson?
I'd like
Ms.
to make
McGrew?
a motion.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to make a motion to approve the award of the task order 6 for the Transportation Improvement Project at Reinhardt College Parkway at Highway 140 intersection to Michael Baker International in the amount of $78,391.47.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All members voted for the motion. Item B, discussion and possible action on private railroad crossing agreement with Georgia Northeastern Railroad Company.
Thank you.
Watson?
Thank you. So last year, the City Council approved a water plant intake screen project. In order for the contractor to complete that project, they have to cross the railroad at the water plant. A new construction crossing will need to be constructed, and in that, the railroad is requesting a agreement to cross the railroad, as well as doing some construction improvements there. The agreement will include a $2,000 yearly license and maintenance fee, and that agreement will increase by 5% each year. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you. So I believe you kind of mentioned the next item, but this item on the agenda is actually just to consider approval of the railroad crossing agreement, correct?
Yes, sir.
Any questions for Ms. Watson on this? Mr. Young?
If there's no questions, I would like to make a motion that we approve the private railroad crossing agreement with Georgia Northeastern Railroad Company, LLC.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All members voting for the motion. And then item C is Ms. Watson alluded to is discussion and possible action on private railroad crossing estimate from Georgia Northeastern Railroad Company, LLC, for an estimated cost of $82,059.27. So this is actually the construction of the crossing.
Correct. This is the estimate to complete the actual crossing. We have negotiated with the railroad and got it to this amount that we've both agreed upon. So staff would recommend approval of this amount.
Okay.
And it is just an estimate. They could bring back potential depending on the actual construction.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
If there's no questions, I would make another motion
Okay.
to
Yes, sir.
approve the private railroad crossing estimate from Georgia Northeastern Railroad Company, LLC, for an estimated cost of $82,059.27.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All members voted for the motion. Thank you, Ms. Watson. Mr. Peppers.
I have just a few items for you tonight. Did receive a request last week from a developer that is seeking an early pour or work outside of our existing ordinance hours project in the city. Accent Canton, which is an apartment project at 201 Hospital Road, is applying for an after-hours work permit to pour concrete early to allow finishing due to the heat during this time of the year. They are requesting pours to start at 4 a.m. They have given a schedule of those pours, which would start next week and run through the first week of August. A little bit more information about that. They expect about 24 concrete trucks per pour. The concrete will be delivered from Ball Ground, so they will be coming to the site from 575 to Riverstone, going north on Hospital Drive, pouring concrete on the site, and then exiting also on Hospital Drive back to Riverstone and to 575. So they will not be intersecting anywhere on State Route 140 there at Walgreens and Marietta Highway. Another item that they mentioned is that it takes about 5.5 hours for them to complete the pour. So if they start at 4 a.m., this allows them to be done somewhere around 9 o'clock in the morning with that particular pouring process. Currently, they could pour from 7 a.m. on under our ordinance. On weekdays, this would just allow them to pour early. Staff has reached back out to them and provided them with a couple of conditions that we would have them consider adhering to if council were so willing to approve. The suggestion would be that they were allowed to pour starting at 4 a.m. on weekdays between now and the end of July, excluding holidays which are recognized by the city, which would be Juneteenth on 6/19 and Independence Day on 7/4. So there would be no weekend pouring early hours. Additionally, they would assure that all of their trucks enter and exit the site from Hospital Drive with no access to Hospital Road. They would also need to hand deliver notice of the work before it starts to residences at 101, 120, 130, 140, 141, and 230 Hospital Road. That includes their developers' contact information. And we would also suggest that the pouring only occur during the months of June and July. As school starts back in August, we're asking that they not have any early pours after school goes back into session that could interfere with bus traffic. Staff's recommendation to council would be to move forward with that. The way the ordinance is written, only changes to work hours can be approved by the council. One of the considerations that we would put before you is that the impact of pouring on traffic. If they don't get the early pours in, then they'll be doing much shorter pours during the day, which actually lengthens the project. So if we can get the pours going this summer, the majority of pours of concrete that would take place on that site would be done during the summer months. And so we wouldn't be lengthening that project and impact on existing neighbors for several more weeks that would go on beyond those pour dates. But ultimately, this is a decision for council. You need to let us know how you would like to proceed so that we can confirm all of those things with a contractor.
Thank you, Mr. Peppers. So are you looking for action this evening?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I would note that this is not the first time we have had requests for early pours. We did early pouring with Northside Hospital Cherokee when it was under construction. And part of that process was that they had to notify the adjacent homeowners at Cherokee during that time. They also had to provide information for who would be on site managing those pours, for emergency contacts for those residents. We did the same when they were building the storage units on the corner of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and Reinhardt College Parkway. That one didn't have as much impact because there's not close by residential properties. In this particular instance, there's, like I said, about 6 homes that are within 100 feet or more of the site.
And would you just review briefly again that if council did consider to approve the early pouring, the conditions that you would suggest that we add to
Yes,
that
sir.
approval?
So those conditions would be, first, that the pouring can only occur early, beginning in June and go through July. Second, that the pouring could start at 4 a.m. on weekdays only, and would exclude the city-recognized holidays of Juneteenth on June 19th and Independence Day on July 4th. That they would assure that all of their trucks enter and exit off of Hospital Drive to the site, and that they would hand-deliver notice of the work to the residences at 101, 120, 130, 140, 141, and 230 Hospital Road, and that also include their contact information. If council's good with it, you could simply just approve with the conditions as written.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Peppers on this? Ms. McGrew?
Has the developer contacted the residents in the area yet?
They have not yet because they were waiting on whatever conditions were in place on them, including dates.
Okay. And that's 3 hours before the legitimate time of work begins. How are they going to mitigate noise?
Well, I mean, there will be noise as it relates to construction. What we have talked before with concrete pouring is they're required to strap down all of their flumes from the concrete trucks. Typically, if you don't have those strapped down as you're going over non-solid surfaces, you'll get some clanging. Mm-hmm. We did ask if they would be able to remove backup sensors as it relates to beeping when things back up. Mm-hmm. There's a new OSHA regulation that can't be done, so ultimately that's not something we can require of them. I will say this, if generally speaking, developers have an opportunity to be good neighbors, and sometimes neighbors will ask for some type of accommodations as it relates to that. Those could be financial contributions. The city has never been a part of those, but we do let the developers know, be a good neighbor. Think about the impact to the residents. I will say in this particular area, the residents are probably used to noise. When the hospital was there, they probably had more noise throughout the night than they will on the construction pour. If we do not move forward with the extended hours for pouring, it's just going to stretch the project out longer for those neighbors.
If we don't approve this, what hours do they pour? In the normal working hours?
Yes, starting at 7 a.m.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Questions? Mr. Tillman?
Mr. Peppers, in addition to the 2 points that you mentioned just now, are there other benefits to an early pour that maybe the public would benefit hearing about?
I mean, we face this ourselves on projects. If you're doing large concrete pours, if there's a major adjustment in temperature, that concrete tends to cure faster. And if there's any issues with the pour, you end up having to take it out and re-pour. And so getting an early start allows them more time to work with the concrete before it starts curing. So if you think about days of pouring, so to speak, if you're working with a shorter window on a pour starting at 7 a.m., it could be that you have curing issues. You're having to tear out and you're having to re-pour. And so, you know, it's going to create conflict regardless. This is an interesting property in that south of the property is all commercial, which has hours that start before 7 a.m. North of the property is a piece that will have townhomes on it, which is not current construction. East of the property is commercial. There is a small sliver to the west of the property that is residential.
I think also one other thing to consider is, you know, getting in the trucks in early and out early before impact to rush hour traffic in the area, which is already congested, although we're going to avoid 140 at all costs. I think could be a benefit on traffic, additional traffic in the area during the morning rush hour. So, any other questions? Or any motions if we would want to consider this, approving this?
I'll attempt the motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve the conditions as read. Will that work? For the after hours pouring, concrete pouring.
Second.
A motion and a second. Have a nod from the city attorney. That qualifies as a
That's fine.
satisfactory motion. So
With the staff stipulations, as read.
thank you. Appreciate that. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All members voted for the motion.
On early Monday morning, sometime between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., we did experience a slight sewer spill at our water pollution control plant. We believe that the spill occurred when bar screens on the headworks faulted and clogged the bypass, which caused some overspill on the site. Our immediate reaction, of course, was to clean up the site. We believe the total spill was less than 7,000 gallons. In this particular instance, we think the culprit was a power surge that faulted out those bars and the SCADA, which signalize alarms to our operators. It's considered to be a low impact spill by environmental protection. They have a wonderful flow chart that you follow on what you're supposed to do with the reporting and things like that. So in this particular instance, there is a storm drain at the south of the site. We believe maybe some liquid entered the storm drain, but we don't know how much of that liquid entered the storm drain. We did post signs on the site, which are required. We also notified EPD, which was also required. We did send notice to the local newspaper, which is also required. We did all of that immediately and within 24 hours of finding the issue. Within 5 days, we provided a written report to EPD, which included information about the date, the location, and the impact. But as I said, this is considered to be a low-impact spill. They may require us to do some corrective action planning. I will tell you that the area of issue is in the older portion of the plant that's operating as we're in the startup phase of the newer portion of the plant. So ultimately, our corrective action is that the older portion of the plant is going away and being replaced with the newer portion of the plant with better technology, alarms, and systems. So I did want to bring that to your attention because we like to be transparent when those things happen. And as I said, I sent it to the local newspaper, even had a conversation with our local journalist about it, and let them know if they had any particular questions, they could reach out to us. Since that time, we've taken some action as it relates to looking at some of the electrical on that older section and seeing what we can do to better manage the process while we're really running an old section, old technology, new section, new technology. So I wanted to give you that particular information. Another item I wanted to bring before you, as you'll recall, back in November of last year, I made a request to the City Council that we work with an outside firm to do an executive search for our police chief. We hired the Mercer Group to handle that search for us for several reasons. One, we wanted a firm that has experience in hiring that particular position, and also we wanted a firm that might have a wider net that they could cast than if the city did the search themselves. We wrapped up that search and we hit a home run with it. We did a great job with it. We have another position that I would like to bring before you for a potential search, which is our Economic Development Director position. That position has been vacant since December, and I've specifically not filled it because we were going through the search. That's a much more difficult search for the city. But over the period of the last couple of weeks, I reached out to the Mercer Group to see if they would provide me with a proposal of doing a similar search. They do lots of searches, but they do not do searches as it relates to economic development. So they made reference to the Chasen Group, which specializes in economic development, tourism, Chamber of Commerce related searches. So I do have before you a proposal that I have sent to each of you about that search. In this particular instance, the cost of the search is $24,500. It's a 120-day process that basically starts with stakeholder interviews. It goes through building out the programming of the search. It goes through the marketing of the search, the acceptance of applications, the narrowing of the applications down to a candidate pool, interviews, selecting a candidate for a formal offer, any contract negotiations that need to occur between the city and that candidate before hiring. Once an individual is selected and hired, Chasen Group gives a one-year guarantee on that individual. If they leave within the year, they will do the search at no cost to the city, less any expenses for travel, which are ancillary costs. Additionally, they agree that over a period of 3 years, they will not include that particular candidate in any searches that they do for positions anywhere else. I bring this to you because as that position's been vacant since December, we have adequate budget in that department to cover the search, and I believe it's in the best interest of the city to move forward in that direction with a professional search firm. If this is something that council would like to consider taking action on tonight, we would need to add it to the agenda, and then we would need you to take action on that particular item. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Peppers.
Mr. Peppers, since we've not had anyone in that role, has there been anyone acting in that role, or is there anything that we've missed out on not having someone in?
It's really been a split duty. So some items I've taken over, some items Mr. Ingram's taken over. Some items have rolled to Valinda Hardy in downtown development. We've pushed some items off into tourism. I don't know that we've lost anything, so to speak, but I do know that as we're working on our tax allocation district and the Downtown Development Authority has acquired property related to that, we're in a particular situation where we need someone with real estate experience and specific experience in recruitment. As you know, we also have 2 requests for proposals that are going out for hotels in the city, one downtown, one up at the reservoir. This person would be instrumental in that. This person traditionally has handled low-interest loan applications from small businesses and been the conduit between them and the state. We're currently handling those as they come through. But the position and the work is budgeted. We're not spending it out of that function right now in the interim.
And what was the second thing? You said real estate experience. What was the second experience?
Real estate experience, small business development experience. This person wouldn't necessarily be working on industrial development. That's something that we lean heavily on of economic development, but small business development and things like that. I mentioned to you earlier on the tax side that 900 of our parcels are commercial industrial properties in the city. We'd love to see that number increase because that takes a little bit of the burden on property taxes from residential property owners. That's something that this position would work on.
Shared with many of you that I think this position is of critical importance to our success. I mean, one of our roadmap tenets is advancing regional economic success and development. We do have a lot of projects going on in the city. I think growing that commercial tax base is important for all of us and benefits all of us, especially our residents. Hopefully reduces the burden on them going forward. I think investing in a search firm that specializes in that position and hiring, locating and finding the best, most qualified professional for that position is really critical to our ongoing success. So I'm certainly in favor of adding that item to the agenda and hopefully approving that tonight if council agrees.
I do have one question.
Yeah, Mr. Waterman.
Mr. Peppers, the $24,500, that is to conduct the search. Are there any other fees if we hire that person? Is there a fee for that? They're talking about a 1-year guarantee.
So the proposal is $24,500 for the search. They estimate up to a cap of $3,000 for additional fees. That would include if we get down to interviews and we need to pay travel costs associated with any of those individuals, any costs that we need to pay as it relates to printing, delivery, any documentation or things like that would come out of that fee. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but we didn't hit near that amount when we did the chief search. They always like to give you just that lump sum possibility, but we didn't hit it.
So then no other guaranteed compensation as far as if we select that person, then there's this. Now it's an extra $5,000 if you hire that person.
No.
In some cases, I ask that because some search firms do that.
That's correct.
You hire our person, then that we've recommended, then we get an extra fee. So I just wanted to make sure.
In this case, there's no additional fees.
Okay.
Anything else? Mr. Tola?
Peppers, you prefer to get action on this tonight?
Since we don't have another meeting in June, it would be helpful. Looking at their 120-day schedule, that would allow us to get somebody on board for the fiscal year.
Okay. So if there are no other questions, I would like to make a motion.
Yes, and Mr. Toland, just remember, I'm not sure what your motion will be, but we do need 2 motions. One to add the item to the agenda, and then a motion for that item to consider.
Oh boy, a twofer.
Yeah, a twofer.
I would
Two
like
for one
to make
tonight.
a motion that we add the search for Clausen Group to the agenda.
Yes, sir.
Second. A motion is second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All members voted for the motion.
So I would like to move that we approve an executive search agreement with the Clausen Group to conduct a search for an economic development director and have the city manager sign that agreement.
Second.
Chasen Group, right?
Jason, yes.
Chasen, I said Clausen. Chasen, thank you.
So we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All members voted for the motion.
Starting 2 weeks ago, we received some conversations from Northside Hospital Cherokee. They are currently working on their plans for expansion of their campus. That will include a new medical office tower and an additional 6 new medical office buildings and 2 parking decks over the next, that's their 10-year plan. They're currently in their first 10-year plan that they completed in 4 years. So they probably will get it done in faster than 10 years. One of the items that they have that's particular to that plan is a second entrance into the hospital. It's a little bit closer to the side. Just in conversation, they will be bringing to you a proposal in July, which would have the signalization at that intersection paid by 3 parties. The city would put in a third, the county would put in a third, Northside Hospital would put in a third. Right now, we believe that estimate to be at $200,000. They're working on their request, but I wanted to let you know that before they come to our first meeting in July so you're aware of that particular request. The last thing I bring to your attention tonight is a conversation that our Downtown Development Authority is having, and we'll have tomorrow at their board meeting. Over the last several months, our staff has been working with the county staff looking at opportunities for partnerships in redevelopment of the area on North Street in Canton. The county's having some challenges with their parking deck and courthouse expansion as it relates to their existing property. And frankly, the city would prefer that the county not buy up a bunch of additional property in the city to develop because they're not necessarily in the business of economic development or housing or the like. Right now, the Downtown Development Authority has a letter of intent to buy 3 parcels on North Street, which are owned by the Prescott Group. That includes the Cherokee North Apartments, 2 additional parcels that touch the former Bray and Johnson site, which the Downtown Development Authority purchased last week. If the Downtown Development Authority enters into the purchase and sale agreement, that would basically have the city and the Downtown Development Authority having control of all the properties between the former elections building and the Judicial Center. The idea from the city is that we would work with the county on looking for a better location for their parking deck, but doing it in such a way that we could have street frontage retail, office, residential, mixed use up on the street, which is better for the city tax base, and also give us an opportunity to provide some residential for that which would be coming down with Cherokee North over a period of time. There's no designs that have been done on that particular work, but the city staff, in working with the Downtown Development Authority, felt like it was in the best interest of the Downtown Development Authority to get access to those properties so that the city could be involved in the decision-making on that side of downtown, not just reactionary to what the county might bring forward. So right now, the letter of intent has the Downtown Development Authority buying those 3 parcels at $4.3 million. Of that, the Downtown Development Authority has an agreement with the mayor and council for a line of credit using our tax allocation district that was approved last year. This fits within that line of credit, so ultimately council could give a nod of approval for them to move forward with that particular project, knowing that that purchase and sale agreement would be completed, and then there's a period of time for closing. The Downtown Development Authority, as I said, meets tomorrow. They would like to hear from council if you're supportive of that particular plan of action before they take any actions on a purchase and sale agreement on those parcels. I will tell you that that also includes a management agreement. The idea is that there's going to be some time necessary to negotiate designs on that particular set of parcels as it relates to downtown, working with the county and, of course, the city being involved in that process. And the management agreement basically states that the existing manager would continue to manage that apartment complex for a period of a year and work with the tenants during that time to make sure that they are able to keep their housing as the city moves forward. That might extend because it might take longer than a year for the city and the county and other parties that we don't know of yet to come up with design plans in that particular area. but it does guarantee at least a year of management and keeping those residential units there.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
On the management side of things, is that a management fee and the city will retain the rents, or will the management company maintain all the rents as well?
They maintain the rents, but they also maintain all the security deposits and are responsible for 100% of the maintenance.
But we'll pay taxes and insurance on the...
We've talked about insurance a little bit. That was one of the points that will still have to be negotiated. They will have to cover a portion of insurance because they're handling the maintenance on the structure, but ultimately it will end up on the city's insurance rolls. It would not be for replacement, though, if that makes sense. As the goal over time would be to take those units down, we wouldn't have an insurance for replacement.
I do believe there's a 60 days due diligence included in that also.
There's a 60-day due diligence period, and after that, a 10-day period to close.
Right. I mean, we have discussed this somewhat, and again, since we're not meeting our second meeting in June, and the DDA is actually meeting tomorrow, that's just want to kind of not agreement there. One's still in favor of this. Again, I mean, for all the right reasons, but primarily it puts control of our downtown, the destiny of that in our control and no one else's, and allows us to design solutions that will work for city and city residents and city businesses going forward that fits with our roadmap and not someone else's needs on a daily basis. So.
And I would also recommend, I would also mention to you that this is one of the recommendations that's currently for our downtown master plan that's under review right now. It's one of the recommendations that's been vetted to the community about that redevelopment in that particular corridor.
Definitely. We've seen what happens to surrounding cities when you enter the city and the first thing you see is a massive parking deck. So again, it's certainly something we don't want for our city. This certainly, again, puts us in control of that property. So I guess you're just looking for head nod. Everyone still on board with, again, this is not a final, we're not proving any contracts or anything, but
ultimately I view the line of credit that the council provided to them is they can use it. If you have a no, you need to give us a no before they use any of it. So if council doesn't have a no, then I take that as authorization for the DDA.
Good. Awesome. And I want to just go on record and thank the DDA for all the great work that they're doing. We're making them work hard, and they're really doing a great job of making sure that we're making the right decisions and doing what a downtown development authority does and does well. So we appreciate them stepping up to the plate and helping us design our own future. So thank you.
Those are all
Anything
the
else?
items I have for you tonight, unless you have any questions for me.
Ms. McGrew?
Thank you. Mr. Peppers, on that sewage spillage problem we had, did we incur any fines for that?
We won't know yet. I mean, ultimately, we filed all of our paperwork with EPD. Generally speaking, they take anywhere from 30 to 60 days to review the application. They may come out on site. They may ask additional questions. But generally, if there's a fine coming from EPD, it's much further down the road before we know that. We don't know what that fine might be.
Thank you.
Anything else from Mr. Peppers? Thanks, sir. We do have one council introduced item this evening, and that is sort of just an update and general discussion on the school zone cameras. Mr. Yanni requested this be added to the agenda, and I think Mr. Tolan had some questions and discussions about it. I know several of you have. So we've asked Chief Farrell to bring us up to speed on red speed or keep us under the speed. But Chief, thank you. I know you've been looking at this and put together an overview for council. And how we got here, what is going on, what the trends have been. Again, all this is information and questions we're getting from the public, and we appreciate your updates on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I appreciate the opportunity. And actually, this is really good for me because we didn't have the cameras like this in Marietta, so I was not real familiar with them. And so this gave me an opportunity to kind of bone up on what these things, how they operate myself in case I'm asked a question too. So when I'm out in the public, it's good for me to know too. So for some of you, this is probably going to be just a refresher type overview. For others, this may be brand new information for you. So at any time during the presentation, if you have a question, please just stop me and I'll do the best I can to answer it. I'm not an expert on this yet, but have a basic understanding. And so if you ask me something I don't know, I will find out an answer for you as soon as I can. So as you know, the history of it, we'll talk about that for just a minute. The city of Canton began utilizing Red Speed in August of 2021. The initial speed study was conducted by Red Speed on East Main Street on August the 5th of 2020. The hours were from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., and according to the information, the weather conditions were fair with no rain. 2 lanes in both directions on East Main Street were observed, and the total number of violations detected was almost 1,300. So we saw that there was a problem there, obviously. So I think that's what implemented the Red Speed discussion, and we moved forward from that point. Another question, I've got about 7 questions here that I've been asked to answer. The role of Red Speed, how they apply for permits, and in charge of signals and signage. And the role of Red Speed is really that. They actually get all the permits for us. They supply the signage. They do the whole thing. They work with GDOT to get it all set up for us. So it's a pretty seamless process for the city. Red Speed does all the work for us on that aspect of things. So once the signs are in location and all the notices have been put out to the public, all that is done, then they go operational. And so they've been operational again since 2021. I think this is probably one of the bigger questions that comes up is when are they operational? What times a day? So is it 24 hours a day? Is it 8 hours a day? The simple answer is when school is in session. And before the school year starts, we get a calendar from the school that tells us the dates they're going to be out for. Any kind of days, conference days, spring break, fall break, Christmas, the first day of school, last day of school. So that information is provided to Red Speed, and Red Speed controls when the camera comes on and when it comes off. So basically like this, an hour before school starts, the cameras are activated and the normal speeds apply. So for example, if the speed limit, and these are just examples, if the speed limit is 40 miles an hour, Red Speed's clocking at 40 miles an hour. It gives you 11 miles an hour over the speed limit. So it'll issue the citation or the notice of speed enforcement at 51 miles an hour. So, but then when the school zone flashes, it drops to the school zone speed. So if it was typically 40 on a normal day and it goes to 25, then when the lights are flashing, then you're going to get that 11 mile an hour buffer, and then the system activates and issues the notice of a violation. So you can just add basically 11 miles an hour to whatever the speed sign is. And again, they're only operational during school, so an hour, an hour before and an hour after. And that should clear everyone out of the area that's school related. So if anyone asks you that question, that's typically how it works, or it is how it works. So any questions about that piece of it at all that I can answer for you at this point? Excellent.
Mr. Young?
I had one question about that. You're talking about when the flashing lights start. I know we have the set hours that the school says we're in session and we're not. Is someone coordinating the blinking light with those hours?
Yes, we do.
You do?
And yes, sir. And I will say this. It's extremely important for us as a city to always take the high ground on these citations. That if we find that there's an infraction that was unjust, that we make sure that we rectify that as quickly as we can. So if there's a malfunction with the system, we need to be very diligent in our processes to ensure that we're not issuing citations that shouldn't be issued. So that's important on our end and also on Red Speed's end that it's functioning properly. So if we have a snow day and the school signs are flashing for some reason but there was no school because of a snow day, we're going to catch those citations before they go in, so we don't have anyone having to come to court because they were flagged improperly. So that's probably one of the most important pieces of this, in my perspective, is that we monitor that very closely. And I think we do an outstanding job from what I've seen thus far with the monitoring of it, what Red Speed does, what we do as a police department to make sure we don't have any true problems that are consistent problems, that we address them as they come up. I'm going to ask the process when a violation is recorded, how the vehicle is identified, and it's a pretty simple system. Red Speed uses laser. It's not a radar anymore. It's a laser, so it pinpoints the actual vehicle. So when it sees the vehicle, it recognizes the speed. So at that point, once it's recognized, the system sends it to their database they use, whatever company that Red Speed uses to get tag information, vehicle owner information. They compile that information together. Once it's done and they see there's a violation, they send it to the police department. We have officers from our SOD unit and a couple of our captains that review these things as they come in. And what they're doing when they review the citations to make sure it is a violation, that they are going 11 miles an hour over, that the tag and the car match. So if it's seen it's on just for example, a red Tahoe and it's on a green Toyota Corolla, obviously there's some kind of malfunction. So they're going to look and see what the problem is, dig a little deeper to the investigative side to see what's wrong with that piece. And the officer has the option then to reject the citation or the notice of violation. It's not a citation like a police ticket. So they have the option to reject that infraction. So anyway, so it's kind of a double check balance and opportunity for us. So Red Speed checks it, we verify and check it, and then it goes to the court side. So once those things are done, let's see. We reviewed it. Everything is accurate. And then it goes to the options for handling the citation. And it's pretty simple for handling again, I keep saying citation, but it's really not a citation. It's a notice of the speeding. You can either mail a check into the city, to the courts, or you can pay it by credit card online, or you can contest it. There's two ways that you can contest it under Georgia law. The first way to contest it is you can say, I wasn't driving the car. And you have to fill out a sworn affidavit or come into open court and testify that you weren't driving the car, you weren't the operator. Or you can sign a notarized document stating you weren't the owner or driver of the car at that time. Or you have a police report that says the vehicle was stolen, and it has to be stolen prior to the infraction. So that's the only two ways that you can actually have this thing dismissed by that. So it keeps kind of that checks and balances with here's what happened. With the citation, I wasn't driving. Here's why I'm going to attest in court that I didn't do it, or the vehicle was stolen. So any questions on that piece about how to contest it? Yes, ma'am.
Who would a citizen contact to give that information?
As far as they'd contact the court. They would schedule it for court.
With court.
Yes, ma'am. The court would tell them what the procedures were to contest it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Excuse me, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. So what would stop me from just saying I wasn't driving the car every time?
Nothing.
I mean, is there at that point, that's it?
That's it. Yeah, it's...
Maybe a guilty conscience?
Yeah, I was going to say, guilty conscience.
I mean,
and taking your time to go to court and sit in the courtroom and wait to go before a judge and talk to the solicitor and go through that process if you're willing to do that for $75.
Yeah, you don't know what people
will
do for $75.
Yes, sir. And so it could become problematic for you if you're doing it every day and you keep coming out to go to court. It's expensive. So I agree. Part of the honor system. That you're doing the right thing, and most take care of the business at hand. So
I guess basically I guess what I was getting at is that that situation, that process stops there. There's no. It stops there. There's no other, X was driving the car, so we're not transferring. So it's, okay. Yes,
and I would mention, if it did come to our attention that you falsely swore an affidavit, then you're into other legal issues.
Sure.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And, again.
But you'd also have to catch me.
Yeah, exactly. So, when you talk about, you could have your children could be driving a car. There's other people that may be in your car that's not you. And again, you could go to contest that if they were to violate that.
Mm-hmm. So I do remember when Red Speed was first implemented, and I think it was probably on Cherokee Connect where someone said, I got 3 tickets in 1 week. And she says, well, in each case, it was not her. It was, one of her daughters. And so in that situation, if it's in the family.
Come to court and testify that it wasn't you, the registered vehicle. The same thing happens probably with all of us with our children. They don't own the car. We do. And they're out in our vehicle. It's registered to us, insured to us. But our children are in the car driving around. So but the infraction is going to come to the owner of the car.
Ultimately, whoever it's registered to is the.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Thank you.
One of the things, too, that's important is that any type of enforcement that we do, there's two things that you need to take care of. One is education. It's, you can stop it and issue the citation, or you can try to educate the driver on the dangers of what they're doing is improper. And so we issue a lot of warnings in the city of Canton. We issue a lot of warnings, and it's, again, for educational purposes. So it's to change behavior. And so what the Red Speed's doing is we're working because we have had a decrease. And when you see those numbers, the decrease in the number of citations, it shows that behaviors have changed. Because most everyone goes the same way routinely. And so now they know these cameras are in place or the devices are in place. So they know at this point, hey, I need to slow down. And so it is successful. If I had been seeing increases, I would think, well, something else is going on that's causing this is not work, it's not effective. But for the educational piece, and yes, some folks have had to pay some fines, but it has overall had a reduction for us, which is significant for pedestrian injuries and fatalities, for vehicle fatalities. So it is good. And I have some numbers just to kind of give you an idea. In 2022, for all the cameras total, there were 24,500 citations accepted. And in 2023, that number had dropped down to 22,054. So it was a 10% decrease in violations that were sent in. So it is working. It's not huge numbers citywide because there's a lot of cars traveling through here every day, but there is a reduction from what we saw initially. Mr. Johnson.
Chief, you talked about education. Guilty as charged. In front of exit number 16, there's cameras up there, and I think there was a little bit of miseducation on what speed to drive versus when the camera's blinking versus when it's not blinking. Is that something we could do some sort of a blast or public education on before those get installed?
Yeah, of course. Yes, sir. I think that's the most important thing is, when Jackie came up and spoke about our social media footprint, that gives us a fantastic opportunity to inform residents, even folks that don't live in the city of Canton. I'm sure there are a lot of users that don't live in the city for our social media footprint, and doing those educational pieces. We could even go as far as to do a press release with the local papers, letting folks know, hey, this is how it works, and this is how the system applies. And it could dispel some of the myths about how the system works. So, because I think a lot of people, including me, I had no idea. I knew where the cameras were. I just didn't know, when they were operating, when they weren't. So I just made sure I wasn't going over the speed limit in my police car, so I didn't get a citation. But I didn't know when that applied. So I think it's a great opportunity and a good idea for us to capitalize on that, particularly before school starts back. We should really do a full-on press about how these cameras work. Because again, it's about education, about safety. It's very important.
I would just mention that every year we see an increase right after school starts because you're getting at least a grade level in each school that's new people to that particular school, people to that particular route. And so we've worked very closely with the schools to help provide that information ahead of time so that they're aware of what's going on in their particular area.
And one of the questions they was asking me too was alternatives. What if we didn't have Red Speed? What would that look like for us if we didn't have the systems in place? So the complaints that we receive, and I speak from my vantage point from Marietta, I'm not so much from Canton at this point, but I'm sure it's the same thing, is that you do receive a lot of complaints from citizens for speeding infractions, particularly in the school zones. I mean, it's constant, going. So when you look at the number of citations over a period of 2 years, it's almost 67,000 citations or notices of the violation. There's no possible way that the City of Canton Police Department could issue 67,000 citations. We couldn't do it. We'd have to be out there 24/7 with multiple officers. It was almost impossible to do that. So this is a manpower multiplier for us. But there's also some advantages too Red speed doesn't discriminate. It doesn't know who's driving the car. It doesn't care who's driving the car. It just sees a car, and if it's a violation, it issues the summons for the violation of the speed, which can also reduce complaints. So if you're stopping 67,000 cars, that's going to increase your probability for officer altercations, complaints, various type of things that we come up with in our world when you're stopping having that many contacts with the public on traffic violations. So there's a benefit to that. Another thing with red speed, it doesn't matter if you're going 11 over or you're going 50 over. It's going to issue the same fine is going to apply, where with a uniform traffic citation, if I were to write the citation, they're going to take into consideration your driver's history and see that, and they'll know at that point, hey, this is the 5th ticket that Marty Farrell's had. The fine is going to be higher. And there are also residual effects to that, too, where your insurance, when you go to renew, they can run a driver's history on you, and then they'll see you have these citations, and your insurance fees go up. So you not only pay the fine for a uniform traffic citation, you also have ramifications for your insurance could possibly go up. So those are things that don't apply to red speed. It's a civil matter. Nothing impacts your driver's history, nothing at all. So but when we issue it, the citation fees are going to be higher, and it's going to be potential super speeder issues come into place. There's a lot of different things that when we issue a citation as police versus the camera that come into play with that.
Chief.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned super speeders. I know there's a lot of people out there that say, because I've heard it a lot, that the cameras operate 24 hours for super speeders. And could you define what you call a super speeder, and is that the case?
Yeah, it's 20 miles an hour over the posted speed limit, and the cameras, and I think that's a big misconception, that they operate 24/7. They're only operating that hour before and hour after school. So really basically from probably 7 o'clock in the morning until maybe 4. That'll be the longest window. So after 4 o'clock, you're pretty much, the cameras are non-functional, so it doesn't matter. So that's the difference. I think that's an educational piece for us to, and I don't know that I want to broadcast that too much. I know we're streaming this live because I want everybody to abide by the speed limit all the time. I don't want them to go, hey, the cameras are off, we're going to go 100 miles an hour down, East Main Street. I'm not suggesting that at all, but I think that for the problems that you face when you have calls and your constituents call, that's a good point to make to them, that this is the way they operate. It's just an educational piece on it. But again, if the cameras aren't out there working, we're out there working. And so we're out there 24/7. So I don't want anyone to think that because red speed's not working right now, it's deactivated. Canton PD's activated. So make that loud and clear that we're out there. So if you want to go that fast, you're taking a chance on meeting one of our guys. So, and I don't think anybody wants to do that, at that kind of speed. So let's see. Again, back to the moving violations. There are no points assessed on your driver's record for this. It doesn't impact that at all. Again, civil with red speed, criminal with the PD when we issue citation. Last question I had was, do we need any other cameras? The only other school that I'm aware of is a private Christian school located in the city, and it doesn't have red speed. I don't think it's something that we probably going to want to look at unless council desires for us to take a look at that. I think one thing that's going to come up when Cherokee High School, the new school, is complete. Prior to that, we probably need to take a look at that and do some assessments of the red speed in that location too. So, but that is pretty much what I have. If there's any questions, please ask me. I'll be happy to answer what I can.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate that information. I think there's also a misconception out there that, the city installed these, as a revenue source. Again, as you mentioned, the studies that were done determined the need for these cameras. I mean, East Main Street alone, during school hours, 1,300 speeders a day. So the cameras were installed, the system was installed to, again, increase the safety of our kids. And on East Main Street, the school bus is entering that. But also, I think the red speed, and also, which is allowed by state, a lot of cities are implementing the system, but the funds collected through red speed, I think it's also restricted how we spend those, and those funds all go back to public safety, is correct?
Yes, sir, that's
So
correct.
it's not like it's going in our general fund that we're making money, but the speeds, the fines collected have to be spent on public safety. So improving the, equipment, technology for our police department and making sure we have the best police department possible. So.
Yes, sir. A good example of that would be our body cameras. It's going to help offset some of the cost of that. So it's technology driven. It's going to help us in all different areas in our world that we live in every day. So the key point, it's safety, 100% about safety. That if we save one person's life, we keep one child from getting run over in one of these intersections, or one family walking to school, it's well worth any investment, any amount of money. And so that's the most important piece of it all. So.
I mean, I know we have complaints, people other complaints are people that have gotten speeding tickets, and I think there's some of us up here that have experienced that ourselves. And again, it is good behavioral change. I can speak from experience, but I always kind of go back to citizens like there's one very easy, simple solution for this is don't speed in speed zone and in school zones. So
exactly.
I had one other question. I'm not sure if it's more appropriate for the chief or for Mr. Peppers. What I see a lot, the one that gets the most comment that I've seen is the one at Hasty. And part of it is, I think, because you've got 40, 25, and 35 right there. Would it be worth looking at making it 35 all the way out to the interstate just for simplicity's sake? Or is that even possible, or what's the reason for the difference, I guess?
So GDOT basically controls the speed up to Brown Industrial. And then there are some regulations on how much you can drop a speed over a certain portion of distance. So I think we're stuck with what we have based upon GDOT speed coming in across the interstate to where they hand over the...
but I thought I'd ask.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
some of you actually may recall we actually attempted that several years ago, and we're quickly, and I believe we may even change the speed limit signs because we do have a lot of complaints from our residents who live off of East Main Street, and speeding is a huge issue. Speeding is an issue on East Main Street downtown, but we were quickly informed we had to go back to the speed zones that were assigned to us, and that was not really in our control. So.
We're also going to be conducting enforcement on that street. Also, there's other things besides speed that you can look at. People following too closely. Hands-free violations. There's a lot of different things you can do. It's just officer presence in the area. It's important for us to be out on those high-volume streets, and so as long as the PD's out and visible, that's the first level of any kind of enforcement is just officer presence. So those big Tahoes are easy to spot, and when people see them, they're going to slow down. They're going to put their phones down. They're going to be a little bit safer drivers. So couple that with the red speed, I think it's a win-win situation for us. And so I assure you, Canton PD is going to be out at these big roads working these traffic problems that we're having. Because I'm already getting calls now from just different citizens about various areas that need some attention, and we're going to continue to give it to them.
Anything else? Thank you, Chief. We appreciate your update. And again, we'll continue. I think the ongoing education and sharing, information with the public. I mean, we can't do that enough. And if it's, helps change the behavior and reduce speeding in the school zones, and I think it's well worth that effort.
Yes, sir.
But appreciate you addressing that, and thanks to council. I know we get these questions all the time, and it's always good to have the facts to be able to communicate back to the citizens. So.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we'll do a big social media push about mid-July or so, and kind of keep pushing that out. I think school starts August 1st, so we'll really beef up the social media piece of it, and use Jackie's resources, our PIO at the PD, to keep pushing this out. And we'll also bring it up at our meetings that we attend. Rotary, everywhere you can go to have these conversations about traffic it's important, because there's a lot of motorists out there. So we'll certainly be on top of that.
Definitely.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That leaves me. I just have one quick item here. We did this morning. The chamber held their 10 and 10 recognition, and the city of Canton actually had 2 individuals out of the 10. I think that equates to 20%, if my math is correct. But we want to congratulate Jesse Hampton with our police department, and our community development director, Kevin Turner, were two individuals recognized in the top 10 and 10 in Cherokee County. So congratulations. We're proud of you. Thanks for making us look good. And And that's all I have this evening. Thank you all for your patience and hard work. I know we covered a lot and considered a lot this evening. And some of that is a gentle reminder that we will not have a second meeting in June, and we'll resume our normal schedule of council meetings in first week in July. So second week in July, sorry. Yes, because July 4th. So anyway, the schedule's getting a little squirrely here, but we will make it through. So thank you, Ms. Forner, for reminding me of that. So, and if there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.